Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings, everybody. It is chilly and cold and more snow is on the way, at least where I live in Iowa. And how about you, Jackie?
The same.
Yes.
Same. Must
Yes.
be that same cold front. But that's
Yeah.
okay. This is only sort of our second and a half snowfall, so we could use some snow.
Okay, good. Well, this is number 124, Fun Chat. Oftentimes we visit with an individual who tells about his or her story of growing up in the 50s. Sometimes we talk with people who didn't even live in the 50s, but whose life has been imprinted by that decade. We often talk to CEOs of companies whose events have covered the 1950s, even prior to that, and going beyond up to present day. But today we're talking to an entertainer. And this will be an excitingly fun chat. So, Jackie, can you take us away and introduce the program?
Okie dokie. But before we introduce our guest, please look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the purple banner. We ask you to go to www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. That is a location for our book, which you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner. While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. And there you will find all sorts of information about the book, about our venues, about the authors, where we will be speaking, and the 1950s Fun Chat. If you click on the 1950s Fun Chat, you will be able to see all 124 of our interviews. Oh, also take a look at the beautiful North Dakota sunset that wraps around the book. And the little white dot, which indicates a very special little event. And the book was published in 2021. And in 2022, that little emblem came on our book because it is the National Independent Press Award for regional nonfiction category as the distinguished favorite. So the little book is very proud to wear that little emblem. So let's get on with the show. We're going to introduce you to Paul David, who was born in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada, in 1963. However, he has been influenced by the music of the 1950s, along with the music beyond that decade. He is a one-man band known as Bandaloni, Band Alone, who has performed in Canada and the U.S. for 25 years. Paul is a graduate of the University of Windsor in Windsor, Ontario, with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Art and Sculpture. He resides in Guelph, Ontario. So we welcome you, sir, to our Fun Chat.
Great to join you, ladies. Thank
Hi,
you.
Bandaloni.
Hi.
So how did the character of Bandaloni come about?
How did that come about? Well, that's a little bit of a long story, but I'll give you the short story. My background, as you mentioned, is in visual art in sculpture, but I also have a background in sales. When I graduated from high school, it just so happened, strangely enough, I was standing outside of the unemployment office looking for a job when I was 18 years old, and my art school teacher from high school happened to walk by, and we had a nice little chat, and she invited me to apply for a job at her husband's stereo shop, which I did, and promptly got the job because of my love and fascination and knowledge of music. And I was put through an intensive sales program at the time. And so as I like to put it, along with my love for visual art and my ability to actually create and make things with my hands, I'm also able to, along with my passion for music, build the equipment that I use, play the equipment that I use, as well as sell it. So as I like to say, I'm able to build it, play it, and sell it. And so those are the three elements that are required to become Bandaloni and to actually make a successful career out of a one-man band.
You
All
are
right.
a one-man band just because of those facets to be able to play it and sell it.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes.
So your early life did prepare you for this job. So
did
what
indeed.
from the 1950s imprinted in your life, which has influenced the style of music that you play when performing?
Well, certainly the music. I've always been a big fan of music, and radio was a big part of my upbringing. Growing up across from Detroit, Michigan, the radio in the small village that I grew up in was incredibly important in my development as a youth. And I spent a lot of time on the transistor radio. And speaking of the 1950s, that's when the transistor was actually invented. So, so if it wasn't for the transistor of the 1950s, for instance, I wouldn't have had the little pocket radio to listen to beside my bed at nighttime. Prior to that, it was large tube radios. And for those of you who know my show, I actually have a replica of an old tube radio that I use in my show as my sound system. However, the transistor radio from the 50s was very important in my youth and through the airwaves, carrying that music to me. So, I perform music from the 50s, such as Elvis. I'm a big Hank Williams fan. I love old country music from the 1950s. I play a lot of Hank in my show. Also, a lot of Chuck Berry, who was the father of rock and roll, as well as the king of rock and roll, Elvis, of course. So the music was very influential, and I'm the youngest of 5 children. And so my 3 older brothers were all born in the 50s as well. So they had a big influence on me.
Yes. And when you talk about developing your program, does that change from location to location? Because my goodness, when I go to your website, which is bandaloni.com, we want folks to realize that and go to your website.
Right.
When I go to your website, I see that you have performed in so many locations, not only in Canada, but the United States. And I'm, of course, familiar with you for multiple years. I've seen you perform on the streets, the Iowa State Fair, and it's been exciting. So how does your program change from location to location?
I wouldn't say it changes from location to location. It's more of a demographic that my music and my performances would change, whether it's an adult corporate event, or whether it's a children's Christmas show, or whether it's a fair. I've become very adept over the years of looking at a crowd and sussing up very quickly the demographic and providing the songs and material and humor that would be appropriate for the event. So I'm always in flux, and it's nice to have multiple personalities, because it allows me to kind of change hats and change songs and change gears.
Mm-hmm.
And so one needs to be very flexible to be a successful one-man band.
Well, now, if folks aren't familiar with you as Bandaloni, the performer, tell us what instruments you play. Tell us how you set this whole thing up and how you entertain.
Well, originally when I started the one-man band, it was somewhat primitive, and I started it in Calgary, Alberta, back in 1999, because it's coming up to my 25th anniversary. It is my 25th anniversary this year, performing. And there was a young man that moved in next door to me that had just returned from Japan, and he had built himself a one-man band, had been busking in Japan for some time, and was very successful at it. And I had some really great ideas and for him, which he really never he never took to heart and applied them. So I said to him, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it, because they're really good ideas. And so I took it upon myself to build a very primitive contraption out of an old kick drum that I had kicking around on the back deck of my house. And it was basically a cymbal, a hi-hat, a tambourine, and a guitar and harmonicas. Now, up to that point, I was playing in bands and writing my own songs. So I was very musically active, as well as making sculpture, constructing large-scale dinosaurs for museums, and casting bronze at the time as well. So I was applying both of my artistic crafts at the time. So it was very primitive in the early days. However, nowadays it's gotten very sophisticated, and the technology has moved along. Certainly, from the inception of the one-man bands, which actually goes back hundreds of years, believe it or not. There's documentation and visuals and pictures and carvings of people playing multiple instruments as far back as 700 years or so. So it is an old, I don't know whether to call it a talent or it's a it certainly is an old way of making a living, I guess. And so over the years, things have changed and evolved. So nowadays, I perform on a very highly sophisticated technical guitar made by an American company called Line 6, which allows me to do a number of very clever things that one couldn't do in the past, such as quickly changing to open tunings, and along with that guitar, I can have it sound like a banjo. I can have it sound like a sitar, a 6-string, a 12-string, an electric guitar, an acoustic guitar. There's very many ways to use that guitar to my abilities, as well as I play a full drum kit on my back, which consists of a kick drum, a snare drum, a hi-hat, a tambourine. I have a cowbell on my guitar. I also play harmonica. I have some technological components up my sleeve and in my sound system that allows me to sing harmonies in real time. So I use 3 microphones that are all attached to my my harmonica brace. And these are all, I construct all of these components myself. And that's the other aspect of the one-man band that it keeps me busy and occupied quite often, and that's just doing repairs and keeping up with the technology.
Well, I'm curious. I saw a photo of that.
Yes, please do.
There he is.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
From the top to describe it. Describe what you are there, Bandaloni, from the top to your feet.
Well, I can tell exactly where I'm at. That's at the Calgary Stampede.
Okay.
And if you look in the background there to the left, that's an acoustic guitar that I would pull out periodically and do just strictly an acoustic show. But what you're looking at there is me in cowboy attire with a cowboy hat. As you can see, I can change my attire as well to fit the event, and the Calgary Stampede is very cowboy oriented. So my drum has since changed color since that time. However, I've got a kick drum on my back, and I don't know how closely you can see, but I've got a hi-hat that rides up the back there. There's a snare drum. There's a tambourine on top of that. There's a cowbell attached to the guitar that you can see as well. So yeah, and those are attached by various levers and straps that attach to the back of my shoes.
That is what is so amazing to me, is how your brain can make this all work. You've got different parts of your body having to create different instrumental sounds, and yet you do it so fluently.
Well, interestingly enough, you've hit on a really interesting point there. As far as using my brain, the trick to it all, I've learned over the years, is not to use your brain. It's actually more of a feel thing, and it's more of doing a dance than it is actually thinking too hard about it. If one thinks too much about it, that's when you've run into trouble. It's a matter of yeah, and I can't describe it better than that. Then it's like a dance, and if anything, it's a feel, and I let that music sort of come through me, and I let my body kind of feel the music and apply the different instruments that need to be done at the same time. So it's more about not thinking.
Okay, and tell us about what the picture Jackie's sharing there with your speaker.
Sure. So that's one of my corporate outfits that I have on there. And that is my grandpod to the right. I call that my grandpod, or I affectionately refer to it as my grandfather's iPod. Now that's my custom sound system that has a number of rack mounted components in the back. And that's really that's the heart and soul of my sound. It allows me to perform and travel around at various fairs and functions and provide the best quality sound that I know of anyone with a roving act out in the entertainment industry has anywhere that I know of.
Jackie, can you put that picture up again, please? I wanted to have Bandaloni describe the hookup from what's that? Back it up a little bit so we can see his feet. And there's a strap going back down behind his shoes. And so, Bandaloni, what is that connected to?
Okay, so there's two straps. One is attached to the kick drum, which is the big drum on my back, and the other strap is attached to what's called the hi-hat. Those are the two cymbals that crash together above my head, and above the hi-hat is a tambourine. So one foot plays the kick drum, the other foot plays the hi-hat, or better, for lack of a better name, the cymbals and the tambourine.
Yes. So, okay, so then I noticed in one of the pictures, and I recall from having seen you live, oftentimes you have to be bent over as you're performing. Does that get to bother your back after a while?
Well, you know what? I have that question asked a lot. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't. If you can imagine someone holding on to your shoulders as you're leaning over, and that's kind of how I've designed the equipment. There is a big backpack frame and straps and a waist belt that holds that drum onto my back. And those straps actually act as a more or less as a restraining device that actually holds me up. If I were leaning over and someone were holding me by the shoulders, you can release the tension by just relaxing and allowing yourself to fall forward. So that's it may look painful, but it really isn't.
Okay. Hey, how many pairs of shoes do you go through every year?
Well, it's usually every couple of years I have to replace the shoes, and they're custom made shoes in that they're store-bought, but they're very expensive store-bought shoes. But I have to customize them and drill holes through the soles and devise a mechanism that fits in the back so that my cables can hook onto it.
Okay. In looking at your website, you talked about a Bandaloni.
Oh, the Bandaloni.
Bandaloni. Tell me about that. Tell us about that.
Well, the Bandaloni is no longer in existence. The Bandaloni was the van that I loaded my equipment up in and would drive around for years. I'm now pulling a trailer, and I have a vehicle that pulls that trailer, which allows me a little bit more flexibility when I'm in different cities to unload, drop my trailer, and have a nice little vehicle to drive around the city in.
Yes. Well, you've had a special opportunity to be featured on national television a number of years ago with a TV show that's still going, America's Got Talent.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that I was on the very first season when Regis was hosting.
I didn't even remember Regis hosting it.
I know. And it's fascinating. Meeting Regis was one of the highlights of my career. However, I didn't realize until after his passing that he is the one person on earth that has been televised the most. And I think most people don't know that. He's been on television more than anyone else on the planet. So it was a real joy meeting him, and it was a real joy watching him work on that show because he was a real pro. So that was a real exciting time for me. And they reached out to me actually up here in Canada to be part of the first season because I think they were sort of lacking talent and lacking some wacky acts for the first season. So that was a real thrill for me to be on that show for sure.
Well, what was the audience response?
Well, the audience response was fantastic. However, as you can imagine, it would be rather ridiculous to allow a Canadian to win America's Got Talent in the first season of America's Got Talent. So, I was basically told to take my drum and beat it.
Has there ever been a Canada's Got Talent?
There has been a number of times. And as a matter of fact, they've reached out to me in the last couple of years to partake. And and because my schedule is so busy any longer, and I'm so busy on the road in the summer times and in the fall, actually making a living, that I just don't have time for it. So
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So what's your next gig for this beginning this season?
well, this is the time of year where I'm actually generating work and still putting my routing together. For instance, I belong to an organization in the U.S. called the International Association of Fairs and Exhibitions, which is it's the international body of anyone that is seriously involved in the fair industry. And every year they have a convention in the U.S. It used to be held in Las Vegas every year until approximately 7 or 8 years ago, they started moving it around. And this past November, it was in Salt Lake City. So every year I go to the IAFE convention and rent a booth and hold out my shingle and generate either new possibilities and new work, or just to greet and sign contracts with previous clients. And anymore, it's become more or less kind of first right of refusal, because I've become very popular at a lot of fairs, including the Iowa State Fair. So I've become kind of a tradition at a lot of fairs. So oftentimes when I go to these conventions, it's more or less just shaking hands and greeting the people that I'm going to see once again in the following year. So at this time of year, I'm routing, I'm sending out contracts, and I'm still kind of finalizing my program for the year. So.
Do you find you need a business manager or someone to handle papers along with you, or you're it? But are there some days when you say, "Oh, if I had somebody to do this, it would make my life a little easier"?
No, because no one knows my act better than I, and and I work very seldomly with agents. Periodically, I've worked with agents, and I do work with a couple that I trust, and they understand my act, and they know how to pitch it, and they know what I need when I get on the other end. However, as I said, no one knows my act better than myself, so no one can actually engage in communication with an event planner or an event, and really iron out all the details that need to be ironed out before I even show up. So that's always a good thing.
What has been the wackiest gig you've ever performed at? I'm going to call it Wackaloni.
The Wackaloni gig that I've ever done. You know what? There are too many. They're too numerous, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Does one come to your mind you can share with us?
Yeah.
Well, one comes to my mind in my inception of my one-man band. When I first built my one-man band in Calgary, Alberta, I did one public performance in Calgary, and then I bought a camper van, and I loaded that camper van up, and I spent 5 months just traveling across Canada, doing shows wherever. And I was doing shows on Parliament Hill in Canada, which would be the equivalent to going to the White House and doing a show. However, that same summer, I did a show out in Prince Edward Island at 12 o'clock midnight after a horse race, where the person who hired me had won the horse race. So there was a big celebration, and I was out behind the horse barns doing my show and busking, and I remember making about $800 or $900 cash from the people that were there, and it was a real thrill for being the first time out of the gate doing that and making that kind of money, and it was quite a celebration and a lot of fun. But you know what? Another show comes to mind. I actually performed in the Parliament building in Canada, in Ottawa, about 5 years ago. So that would be the equivalent of playing sort of in front of Congress, I guess it would be. So
what did you wear? Did you change your attire for that?
No, I wore my sort of fancy silk corporate outfit for that. You know, you gotta dress up for the politicians.
Okay.
What kind of events other than fairs and I'm going to, in large fairs such as the Calgary Stampede or rodeo events. What are some of the other events in which you perform?
Oh, over the years, there's not much that I haven't done. I've done everything from store openings, and when I say store openings, I'm talking major stores. Like I remember opening up a new McDonald's. I've opened up. I don't know if you have TSC stores in the U.S. The Tractor Supply Company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we have TSC. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've worked with them. I've done everything from children's birthday parties. I've performed. Oh gosh, I've performed for so many corporations over the years. I've lost track. I don't even have them all listed on my website any longer. I've performed in seniors' homes. I've performed in people's backyards. I've performed. I've made several television appearances.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I really sat down and think about it, I could come up with some more, but it's kind of right across the board.
And so your calendar year for performing usually starts when, or goes from what month to what month?
Well, it's changed over the years, and that's another thing. One needs to be flexible with the time. In 2008, with the downturn in the economy, I lost a lot of my corporate contacts. I would do a number of Christmas shows and corporate shows throughout the year, but corporations started tightening their purse strings at that point. And then, so I used to have a really remarkable Christmas season, but ever since COVID, that's kind of fallen off the map because companies have stopped having Christmas parties with large gatherings. It's starting to come back a little bit. So I would go, throughout the year, but primarily nowadays it's the summer months, June through October, 5 months, I'm pretty much on the road full time. Mm-hmm. And that's enough to carry me through the rest of the year. So I'm pleased with that. I feel like I'm kind of living semi-retired all the time now.
Do you ever perform on cruise ships?
No, I have a lot of colleagues that perform on cruise ships, hypnotists and magicians and jugglers. However, they do kind of a stage show, and my show is a little different in that I'm a bit of a one-trick pony, and to get my equipment on and off a cruise ship is a little bit of a delicate operation as well, just by the sheer size of it and shipping it around and moving it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I wonder if they would require a contract though for a certain period of time, at least for one cruise and maybe more. So
that's right.
And doesn't quite fit into your lifestyle.
Well, some of my friends, they're on board for 3-4 weeks at a time. And it's and speaking with some of them, it's kind of a young person's game in that regard. The older you get, the closer at home you want to be, and the closer you want to be to friends and family. Mm-hmm. So, I've kind of taken my sights off of the cruise ship lines. It right. doesn't really seem to be my thing any longer.
No. Do you ever hope to perform in other countries?
Well, I do, and I would. Once again, it comes down to equipment. And having said that, I am in the process of redesigning some of my equipment to actually do that and to be a little bit more mobile in terms of using flight cases to fly equipment around and having different setups at different places. The Grand Pod is just too large and too heavy to move around.
Yes, but that's such for me as a spectator, that's such a neat part of your performance. Seeing that, because it definitely takes me back decades ago, which I think is kind of fun too. Mm-hmm. Well, Bandaloni, I'm curious to know, what is your dietary intake when you're on the road, traveling here and there? Do you hang out at McDonald's or what?
How do you keep healthy?
How do I feed all 10 of those members of my band?
Yeah. 10 toes, 10 fingers.
That's it. Well, you know what, ladies? I'm proud to say that I'm actually a very good cook, and I prefer to eat real food. I like Michael Pollan's method of eating, and that's eat real food, mostly vegetables, and not too much. So I try to to stay with that diet in mind. Now, having said that, when I'm on the road, I tend to dine at restaurants that make real food when I can. However, there is the occasional stop at McDonald's when I'm between shows.
Oh.
And it's almost a given anymore in a rat race society.
It really is. It's very difficult to find. Well, and I'm very careful too. I do pack food with me when I do have an opportunity and take it on the road with me. But I'm very health conscious in terms of what I do put in my body. I mean, you literally are what you eat. So I have to keep the band fueled with the proper energy sources. So
Sure.
Where do you see the future of Bandaloni?
Well, you know what? That's a really interesting question, because that's kind of that's kind of at a crossroads where I'm at right now, where, you know, I'm seeing that light down the road, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, wow, you know, this isn't getting any easier. I'm not getting any younger. That drum isn't getting any lighter. As a matter of fact, it gets heavier every year. So I'm looking at, as I mentioned, redesigning and rebuilding some of my equipment to make it lighter and a little more portable. So I'm kind of rethinking my whole approach to the one-man band, and it may become eventually a sit-down one-man band. And there are many forms of one-man bands, and one of them that's quite popular is just a sit-down one-man band where someone is in front of a drum kit and performing. So I have some ideas up my sleeve that I'm working on in that regard. Now, I can see myself kind of going back to my beginnings and playing in seniors' homes and schools and perhaps you know, doing less road work and traveling so much. And honestly, that's as exotic as it may sound to some people, living out of a suitcase for months on end and traveling as a musician can get pretty tiring the older you get. And you know, if it wasn't for the friends and the families that I've gotten to know in all these different ports that I performed in, and when I say friends, you know, one of the things that keeps my my attitude buoyant is sitting around at nighttime at some of these fairs and festivals with other entertainers like jugglers and hypnotists and clowns. And I'll tell you, it makes for very entertaining conversation when you're having dinner with some of those folks at night.
I bet. Have you ever had someone come up to you and say, because this is your 25th year, come up to you and say, I saw you when I was 6 years old, and I'm still watching you. I'm still coming to your performances. Anyone say that to you? Well,
not only that, but I'm even this past summer at the Iowa State Fair, I'm now having children of parents that saw me years ago bringing their children around. So I'm now entertaining third generation children and babies. And I'm continually amazed, because I'm not really one to look in the rear view mirror. So when someone does come up and show me, and quite often they show me pictures from, you know, 20 years ago. Oh, do you remember this? Do you remember me? And it's like, wow, I don't, but that's really quite a nostalgic kind of look back. And wow, you're making me feel old.
Well, I think it's also interesting too, is that when I have seen you, you don't require much space for performing, but there are crowds of people who gather around and they're 10 deep watching you, just because your music draws them in. And for me, I can be a block away and hear you, and I'm thinking, I got to get over there and see him.
Well, that's sweet.
Yeah. So do you sing also?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Not all the time, but some of the time it's not.
Well, poorly some of the times, and hopefully better at others.
Okay.
But yes, I definitely sing. Okay. I sing, I play harmonica, I play all the instruments, I do the harmony parts, you know, it's all there. You know, one of the biggest compliments I get are from other musicians.
Oh, good.
And I can look out into a crowd when I'm performing, and I know who the musicians are by how they're watching me.
Oh.
And the musicians that come up to me after my show and give me kudos are the ones that really make my day, because I know they've taken the time to actually stand there and understand and watch what I'm doing and know how difficult it is.
Oh, yes.
I make it look easy to a lot of people, but musicians understand the complexity and the involvement and what it really takes. However, I do enjoy a bigger space, because it does allow people too to become part of my show, and that's part of what I want. I want to engage the crowd. I want to engage children to come out and play and to dance, and I want adults to come out and play and dance. I want people to let their guard down and enjoy themselves and just forget about their own troubles and the troubles of the world, and just get lost in the magic and the wonder of it all, and to realize that, wow, one can do anything in life, whether that's being an astronaut or a one-man band. It doesn't matter. Use your imagination, take some risks, and go out there and spread a little joy.
Bandaloni, I think you've summed up this wonderful fun chat conversation that we've had in what you said. And I can't wait to see you this summer at the Iowa State Fair. And I'll come and I love meeting our fun chat guests face to face. So remember my face and I'll remember your face.
I will.
Okay. Thank you. Jackie, how can you close out?
Okay. We do thank you very much for your time. And viewers, we'd like to have you take a look at that red button. That's the subscribe button. Please touch that, as well as the blue thumbs up button. And I leave you with, let everybody know about the 1950s Fun Chat. Your friends, even your relatives. Until next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.
Bye, ladies.